Hey guys, tonight we're drifting somewhere a little saltier than usual. Not a battlefield, not a palace, not even a library filled with old scrolls. Tonight we're floating, literally, through a story made of bamboo, salt air, and the soft sound of paddles cutting through still water. You're stepping into a village with no streets, no sidewalks and no land. Welcome to the floating villages of Vietnam. You, with your electricity and weather apps and upstairs neighbors who drop kettlebells at 6 a.m., probably wouldn't survive here. Not because it's dangerous, but because, well, where would you even plug in your phone? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, leave a comment. What time is it where you are right now? And could you live in a house that moves every time the tide breathes? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand on something that shouldn't feel stable. It sways a little under your feet, creaking gently like an old rocking chair. Around you, houses float, not hover, not bob like balloons, but actually float, on calm jade green water. They're tied together by ropes, forming invisible streets, though the only traffic here involves rowboats and the occasional very confused duck. This isn't some amusement park setup. This is real. These floating villages, especially those in Ha Long Bay and parts of central Vietnam like Phu Yen, have existed for generations. Homes built on platforms of bamboo, oil drums, or even bundles of styrofoam. They don't just survive. Here, they thrive. You notice how the water is both a road and a pantry. Beneath your feet, fish dart in cages hanging just below the platforms. It's like living on top of your refrigerator, efficient, but don't fall in. And yes, the villagers do sometimes just reach through a trapdoor in the floor, grab a fish and call it dinner. You pass a house where the laundry hangs on a bamboo pole and it smells faintly of salt and shrimp paste. A radio crackles with a weather report from the mainland. The woman listening looks serene. Maybe she's checking to see if it'll rain, or maybe she's just wondering if her floating house will gently nudge her neighbors again tonight. And the architecture, that's the strangest part. There's no foundation, just rafts. Lashed together with uncanny precision, roofs are made of corrugated tin or woven leaves, depending on budget or stubbornness. Walls are thin, and everything creaks with character. You think of modern minimalist homes, all cement and white paint, and glass, and then you look at this organic floating system of life and wonder who's really advanced. Children paddle to school. With backpacks and boat paddles in hand, they glide across the morning mist like it's no big deal. One kid even drinks a juice box while steering. A small floating master of multitasking. The first floating villages here likely emerged in the early 20th century, though some argue they existed long before, as temporary fishing outposts that simply stayed. Some historians still debate the exact origin. Did they grow from coastal migration, or were they born out of necessity when storms wiped out land-based homes? The truth may be somewhere between the waves. One little-known fact, these villages have an incredible system of navigation. Without GPS or even signs, they can tell direction based on the rhythm of the water against their walls. It's like having a built-in tide whisperer, a skill that would make your phone's compass weep in shame. You stop at a junction, well, a spot where 3 platforms are roped together, and hear the faint tapping of someone playing a bamboo flute. It echoes over the water like a lullaby for the village itself. Peaceful, haunting, like a ghost that forgot it was supposed to be, scary and just decided to vibe instead. The locals wave as they pass by. Their faces are weather-worn but gentle. They carry baskets of fish, vegetables, and occasionally a very suspicious-looking goose. It's unclear if the goose is a pet, or dinner, or possibly both, depending on the week. Here, everyone knows. Everyone, there's no doorbell per se, just a polite knock on the wooden hull or a shout across the water. And gossip. Oh, it travels faster than a school of fish fleeing a net. You sneeze, and someone 3 rafts down asks if you've tried the ginger tea from Mrs. Lan. Life is dictated by tides and fish migrations. It's quiet, but never silent. Peaceful, but full of motion. The The kind of existence that makes you question the noise of your own. Could you live here? Probably not, but it's nice to visit, especially in your imagination. And as you sit there, letting the platform rock you like a cradle, you realize something strange. You're starting to hear your own breath in rhythm with the waves, like the village is slowly sinking with you, or you with it. It won't be the last weird feeling you get tonight, but don't worry, that's kind of the point. The sun is barely up and the village is already awake, but not in the way cities do it, with alarms and traffic horns and someone angrily microwaving coffee. No, here it's the sound of soft splashes, bamboo creaks, and one very determined rooster who seems to think his voice can echo over open water. He might be right. You step outside and, well, onto the plank walkway loosely tied to your neighbor's raft, and nearly trip over a bucket of fish. Welcome to the floating morning. Routine. Everyone is busy and nothing stays still. It's like a slow-motion dance of chores and conversations, choreographed by the tide. Today your feet take you toward a little house with a roof like a bent straw hat, wide at the top, drooping slightly at the corners, and patched with pieces of old raincoat and even somehow a broken plastic fan. It's both absurd and charming. You knock gently on the side and the man inside chuckles. "No need," he says. "I saw your shadow coming." Inside he shows you how he built his home, or rather grew it. That's what he calls it. Because every part was collected, scavenged, adapted. The foundation, a lattice of split bamboo, tied together with coconut rope. Floating barrels wedged underneath like upside-down shields, and on top, wood reclaimed from old boats framed with more bamboo. Some walls are woven, others are nailed. It's a Frankenstein of a house, but it floats better than most things you've ever sat on. And it doesn't just float, it flexes. When the waves shift, the house groans gently, adjusting its balance. You try to sit on a wooden stool only to have it slide an inch to the left. This is the kind of place where furniture has a mind of its own. The man, you think his name is Bak Hung, though everyone just calls him Ong Tho, talks while shaping a new wall panel. He doesn't draw plans. He says if you understand the water, you don't need a blueprint. You just listen. Apparently the trick is in the angle. Roofs here are built to laugh at storms, not stop them. No, that would be ridiculous. But to sway, to let the wind pass like a grumpy guest. Who didn't bring gifts? The best ones, he says. Breathe with the sky. You try to picture your apartment doing that and shudder. It would probably just leak. He shows you a moving nail, a kind of joint made of folded tin and flexible bamboo that bends but doesn't break. It's his favorite part of the house. When you ask why, he taps it twice and says, "Because it forgives me when I make mistakes." Fun fact, many of these houses are designed with detachable rooms, not for redecorating, but for evacuation. If a storm rolls in too fast, you can literally unhook a portion of your home and tow it to shelter. Imagine being able to float your bedroom to safety, while the living room rides out the wind. IKEA could never. And then there's the matter of anchors. You assume they use something heavy like stones or metal. Nope. Some homes are anchored with bundles of seaweed tied to sunken bamboo stakes. Lightweight, renewable, and, according to Ong Tho, friendlier to the fish. You wonder what the fish think of that. One of the oddest details? The village doesn't have chimneys, not because there's no cooking, but because smoke just escapes through the roof seams. When it rains, they cover their stoves with inverted. Works? Simple, yes. Foolproof? Mostly. Except for the time someone forgot and turned their wok into a tiny hot tub for frogs. It's not all charm and cleverness, though. You notice some houses lean a little too far to one side. Wood rots. Barrels spring leaks. A home here needs constant love, or at least daily duct tape. People say if your house hasn't sunk at least once, you haven't really lived on the water. Still, there's something elegant in this chaos. A floating home isn't just a place to sleep. It's a living thing. It moves with you, sighs with the wind, argues with the tide, and every now and then probably judges you for tracking in too much mud from your paddle boat. As the morning drifts into late morning, there's no rush. After all, Ong Tho hands you a cup of tea made with rainwater and ginger. It tastes earthy and slightly metallic, but comforting, like drinking something brewed by a kindly forest spirit who also doubles as a plumber. He tells you his house, has moved locations 5 times, not from land to land, but from one cove to another, each time following the fish or the seasons, or simply a better view. A house that doesn't move, he says, grows blind. Some historians believe the architecture of these villages evolved from ancient raft dwellings in the Mekong Delta, a style called Nha Bay, combined with the practical knowledge of coastal fishermen. But others argue it was more spontaneous. Just necessity turned into habit, habit into tradition. The truth? Well, as usual, the historians are still debating that. Outside, a boy floats past in a bucket, not a boat. An actual metal bucket, large enough to hold him, and one highly skeptical. "Can't you try not to laugh, but Ong the grins. That one's got balance," he says. "And poor judgment." You sip the last of your tea and look around. The houses shine in patches, some with tin sheets reflecting sunlight like sleepy mirrors, others dulled by years of salt and wind. They all sway together like a slow dance. You're just now learning the steps to, and just as you're about to leave, Ongdo hands you a small nail bent at one end. "A souvenir," he says, "from a house that forgives." You tuck it into your pocket, and with that, you step back. Out onto the plank, letting the water beneath remind you, nothing here stands still, but everything floats just fine. The plank walkway beneath your feet groans a little louder today, maybe because you had that second helping of sticky rice last night, or maybe it's just being dramatic. Either way, the village is buzzing, or rather, gently rippling, with energy. It's a school day. You paddle slowly toward a long, narrow raft where the laughter of children bubbles up before you even see them. Their school doesn't have gates or a playground. Instead, it floats on 6 blue plastic barrels, a few tired-looking planks and an optimistic flag fluttering in the breeze. Welcome to the classroom. Inside, there's a chalkboard, a small bell, and rows of tiny wooden benches, all bolted down, to prevent enthusiastic learning from tipping the whole structure over. The air smells of seaweed and old books. The teacher, a woman with a sun hat bigger than the desk, greets each child by name as they arrive, most of them paddling solo in miniature boats made from styrofoam boxes, bathtubs or things that really shouldn't be seaworthy but somehow are. You sit in the back, trying to blend in, but it's hard to go unnoticed when you nearly fall off your chair every time a wave rolls in. The children don't even flinch. This is normal. In fact, the bell to start class is literally a piece of coral tied to a string, because why not? The lesson today is arithmetic. The teacher draws fish on the board. If Min catches 12 mackerel and eats 2, how many can he trade for rice? A hand shoots up. Depends if he keeps the heads. Cue laughter. What you might not know is that these floating schools aren't just adorable. They're essential. With no roads, no landlines, and no stable electricity, education here floats quite literally on hope and elbow grease. Some teachers travel for hours by boat each week to reach these villages, and when storms hit, school gets postponed, not cancelled. Postponed until the raft is patched, the anchor reset, and the chalk dried. In one corner there's a bookshelf tied down with fishing rope. It's got maybe 20 books, all water-warped, most handwritten copies of textbooks that have been out of print for years. Still, the kids read them like treasure maps. You pick one up and discover it's a Vietnamese translation of treasure. Island scribbled in ballpoint pen. Poetic, really. Outside, a girl paddles up late, one arm holding a tray of fried tofu. She's forgiven instantly because she brought snacks. The class erupts in excitement. It's a floating feast day. Turns out, once a month, parents send food with their kids to share. Dried squid, sticky rice, sweet potatoes boiled in coconut milk. You try a bite. It's divine, and only slightly damp. Not all is idyllic, of course. Rain means class moves indoors, if indoors means under a plastic tarp stretched over half the raft. And sometimes the floorboards swell and creak so much you feel like you're learning on a waterbed. One teacher, you meet him on break, sipping tea from a reused bottle, tells you about the time the chalkboard floated away mid-lesson. "We took it as a sign," he says, and taught swimming instead. The kids passed with flying colors. He's been teaching here for 12 years. Used to teach on land, but found the stillness of desks unsettling. Here, he gestures to the wobbling classroom. You never forget the world is alive. There's Even a physical education class, a euphemism for splash around and pretend it's organized. But the kids are nimble. They can balance on planks you wouldn't dare step on, leap from boat to boat without blinking, and some of them can steer using just their feet. One boy claims he can write while rowing. You suspect it's a lie, but appreciate the ambition. And music. It's whatever floats by, literally. Someone from the nearby raft plays a bamboo flute and the teacher seizes the moment. "Everyone," she says, "let's write a poem about the sound of the tide." A hand goes up. "Can I write about fish instead?" "Only if the fish are poetic," she answers. By now you've realized that this isn't a simulation of life. This is life. Beautiful, ridiculous, and clever. Even the pencils have tiny strings attached, so they don't fall into the sea. And there's a rule. If you drop your notebook, you have to recite your multiplication table before diving in to fetch it. Brutal, but effective. Some historians say floating schools are a modern invention, born of NGO projects and educational reforms. Others argue they've existed in some form for much longer, as boat schools in the Mekong or portable classrooms used during wartime. Again, the historians can't quite agree, and you're beginning to suspect they just like arguing for the fun of it. You spend the afternoon helping the teacher collect worksheets that are half math problems, half jellyfish doodles. It's important to be well-rounded, she jokes. Then she asks the students to write one sentence about what they learned today. One kid writes, "Fish are good at math." Another, "If I paddle fast, I don't have to be late." And a third simply writes, "Water is not quiet, but it is kind." You smile. That one feels like a proverb. As school lets out, the children pile into their floating tubs and mini-boats, calling goodbyes across the rippling water. It's a strange kind of recess, the kind where the playground has no fences, and your classmate might drift into the distance if they aren't paying attention. You help pull the tarp over the school's roof. It flaps lazily in the breeze like a sleepy bird settling down for a nap. The teacher thanks you with a smile and hands you a shell. "For luck," she says, "in case you forget the way back." You clutch the shell and step back into your boat. School fades behind you, a soft humming dot in a sea of green. Somewhere between the lessons and the laughter, you realize you've learned something too, though, if pressed, you're not sure you could explain what it is. Only that it was important. You wake up to the smell of fish sauce and fried banana, which is surprisingly not as horrifying as it sounds. The air is thick with morning mist, the kind that clings to your eyebrows and makes everything feel like it's happening inside. A dream wrapped in a wet blanket. Today is Cho Noi Day and Floating Market Day, and the whole village is humming with anticipation. You paddle toward the commotion. It starts slowly. A single boat with a flag made from a raincoat, then 2 more, then 5, then 12, until suddenly you're in the middle of a liquid city center. Boats of all sizes bump gently into one another like sleepy bumper cars, their owners shouting prices with voices half swallowed by the fog. This isn't your typical supermarket experience. For one, there are no aisles. Just current. No shopping carts either, unless you count the old man towing a smaller boat behind his own, filled entirely with chili peppers and 2 disgruntled ducks. Each boat sells something different. One carries pineapples stacked in a perfect spiral, each with its own tiny flag. Another is brimming with plastic sandals, hanging like fruit from a bamboo pole. A third sells nothing but fermented shrimp paste, which you smell long before you see it. You float closer to a woman, selling fish sauce. She scoops a ladle into a barrel, pours it into a reused soda bottle, ties the cap with string, and hands it off with a nod. It smells intense. Like the ocean's personal opinion on your hygiene, you buy one anyway. When in Rome, or in this case when in a boat on a bay buying condiments from a floating vendor who may or may not also sell amulets on the side, markets like these are not just about food, they're about everything. One boat is a barbershop, complete with a rickety chair nailed to the floorboards and a mirror that looks like it survived several small wars. A man gets a trim, while the barber balances with 1 foot on the side rail, scissors snipping in time with the rocking boat. You see a boat stacked with clothing, its owner arranging pants by size using fishing line. A customer approaches by canoe, haggles mid-paddle, and then tosses over a bundle of dried squid as payment. The pants are handed off on a long bamboo pole like a relay baton in a fashion marathon. One end of the market floats a boat that's essentially a karaoke machine. For a small fee, you can belt out a power ballad while your neighbors politely pretend not to judge. Someone is currently singing a mournful love song to a cat. The cat is unimpressed, and yes, there is a wedding section, or rather one particular boat that, for reasons no one seems to remember, only sells wedding-related items. It's draped in pink cloth, decked out in plastic flowers, and features a stack of shiny red gift boxes that squeak when touched. You ask why it's always there. Someone shrugs. It's been selling wedding stuff since before my parents met, they say. We don't question it. As charming as all this is, it's also an impressive system. Traders know when the tides shift. Prices change depending on rainfall. The unofficial market master, a woman in her 80s who wears sunglasses at all times and keeps notes in a waterproof notebook, tracks everything with eerie precision. If a typhoon is coming, she'll know before the radio does. The origins of floating markets like this are debated by, you guessed it, historians. Some claim they started as seasonal gatherings during festivals, then evolved into daily events as trade demands increased. Others believe they date back to ancient times, when rivers were the only highways. The only thing everyone agrees on, they work somehow. There's even a floating cafe. It offers tiny cups of thick, dark Vietnamese coffee, poured from a dented kettle, and served with cubes of ice in a plastic bag. The barista is 12. His boat has a little sign, Café Songnier, gentle wave coffee. You order one and nearly cry from joy and caffeine. It's like being hugged by a storm cloud made of espresso. Not everything is picturesque, though. There's shouting, some squabbles over pricing, and the occasional loud thunk when boats collide too enthusiastically. But it's all part of the rhythm. Like jazz, if jazz involves squid and aggressive bargaining. You drift past a boat where a woman is sewing buttons onto shirts. Her fingers move faster than the waves, and she hums a lullaby to herself. Next to her is a child selling handmade postcards, each painted with scenes of the market. You buy one with a picture of a boat on a boat selling boats. It feels oddly profound. Somewhere behind you, a man yells about discount coconuts, and another boat sets up a puppet show, a floating stage with water beneath, and children clapping from passing rafts. You realize this market isn't just a place to shop. It's a village within the village. A weekly reminder that even when your home floats, community doesn't drift apart. It gathers. As the sun rises higher and the mist begins to lift, the boats start to disperse. One by one they untangle and paddle off, leaving behind ripples, echoes, and the faint smell of fried something. You watch the final boat disappear into the shimmering horizon, then look down at your basket. Fish sauce, pineapple, a single red button, and a tiny hand-painted card that somehow feels heavier than it looks. And as your own boat gently turns, rocked by the last waves of the morning, crowd, you realize you've just been to a market that doesn't stay still, but somehow manages to hold everything together. The sun has climbed lazily into the sky, spreading its warm fingers across the water as you drift back toward the quieter end of the village. You're heading home. Not your home exactly, but the one you've temporarily borrowed from a very trusting fisherman who's currently off chasing squid and existential meaning near the horizon. As your boat nudges gently against the floating platform, something slaps the water below. You peer over the edge, and there it is. Her flash of silver, a little splash, and the faint sensation that something with fins is watching you. Welcome to the unofficial downstairs neighbors of the floating village. The fish. These aren't just fish. They're roommates. They live in pens, under the house, in nets stretched between bamboo poles, or in improvised cages made of chicken wire, old plastic crates, and whatever else was lying around when someone decided, hey, maybe I'll raise fish under my house. You lean over the edge and watch. Schools of tilapia shimmer beneath the surface, weaving like synchronized swimmers. A few groupers, big enough to look like they pay rent, lurk near the corners. Someone down the raft is tossing rice husks into their pen, drawing a feeding frenzy that sounds like wet applause. You never thought you'd describe fish as chummy, but these are. One pokes its head above the water as if checking on you. Another flicks its tail, splashing your sandals. It's the aquatic equivalent of a neighbor knocking on your wall because your TV's too loud. Except here, the TV is probably a chicken making questionable choices in the living room. Many families keep different species in different sections like underwater apartment complexes. There are the calm tenants, catfish and carp, the drama queens, snakeheads and mudfish, and then there are the shrimp, who just sort of hover near the bottom, minding their own business like tiny introverts in shell armor. What's surprising is how deeply woven these fish are into daily life. Need lunch? Just lower the net and grab one. Feel stressed? Sit at the edge and watch the water ballet. Want to keep your kids from running off? Threaten them with cleaning the fish cages. Apparently, it works. And these aren't just passive pantry items. Some villagers give names to their favorites. One family refers to a particularly large catfish as Bak Hai, because he's been there longer than most uncles. There are even stories, told in half-laughter, of fish that seem to respond to voices or splash extra hard when gossip is being whispered above them. But don't be fooled by the whimsy. Fish farming here is serious business. It's how many families make their living, especially in villages with little access to land or traditional markets. The fish are fed, monitored, sometimes even moved between pens to simulate the natural flow of water. The entire system functions like a vertical ecosystem. People above, fish below, all dancing on the surface of the same world. Of course, it's not without its quirks. You meet one teenager who swears his fish stopped growing because they heard his parents arguing too loudly. Another insists that playing music helps their tilapia feel inspired. You nod and pretend to write that down in your imaginary doctoral thesis. The emotional interior lives of semi-domesticated fish in mobile aquatic architecture. At one point, a boat pulls up with sacks of fish food, essentially fermented soy meal that smells like gym socks left in a tropical cave. As it's unloaded, a kid helpfully sprinkles some into the pens with all the solemnity of a Michelin star, chef plating risotto. Some historians trace this style of integrated fish farming back centuries, possibly influenced by practices in the Mekong Delta or Chinese river villages. Others argue it developed more recently, as floating communities expanded and needed a stable food source without overfishing. Once again, historians are still arguing, probably while eating grilled tilapia because irony tastes best when slightly crispy. There's a practical side to the relationship too. The fish help clean up food scraps, keeping the water under the house from turning into soup. In return, villagers protect them from predators, both the natural kind, like birds or snakes, and the less natural kind, like hungry neighbors with long poles and no shame. You notice one floating house has a little bell hanging over the fish pen. What's that for? You ask. The owner grins. Security system, she says. If someone tries to steal my groupers, they'll knock it and I'll know. You ask if that's ever happened. She nods. Once. I yelled so loud he fell in, got bit by my smallest fish, still won't visit this side of the bay. You're beginning to think the fish have more personality than most humans you know. And then there's the evening feeding ritual. As the sun starts to lower, casting everything in that dreamy gold glow Instagram influencers pretend is natural, the village gathers. One by one, people come to the edges of their homes, tossing handfuls of food into the pens. The water comes alive. Splashing, swirling, that satisfying blur of motion and light. It's part harvest, part performance, part prayer. You sit on the edge with your legs dangling, watching a school of fish whirl beneath your toes. A tiny one jumps and lands with a splash so well-timed it feels choreographed. For a second, you imagine the whole village is floating on top of an aquarium, and you're just another strange fish who hasn't grown fins yet. And as the sky deepens from blue to rose to violet, the fish slowly quiet down. The ripples soften. The splashes become gentle nibbles. It's like the village is whispering a lullaby underwater. You lean back, breathe in the scent of salt and silt and algae, and it's not bad. It's honest. And somehow, it tells you everything's all right, even if your bedroom hums with bubbles, and the floor sometimes squirms. It's late afternoon now. That soft golden hour when everything looks like it's been dusted with warm sugar and forgiveness. You paddle gently back to the part of the village where people live full-time, not just visit or trade or teach. This is the real heart of the floating world. The living rooms, the kitchens, the corners filled with plastic stools and tangled fishing nets, and the occasional sleeping dog on a tarp. You drift alongside a house that looks like it was built by someone with a deep love for symmetry and absolutely no concern for angles. The walls lean in slightly. The windows don't quite match, but it floats and it breathes, creaking softly in the wind like a lullaby wrapped in wood. You tie your boat up to a beam that might be a support post or might just be there because it's pretty. A man inside waves you in. "Tea?" he asks. "Of fee." Course, there's always tea. The inside of his home smells like ginger and rain. The floorboards are uneven and you keep your feet wide apart just in case one of them decides today's the day it retires. His wife is weaving something in the corner, humming an old tune about lost hats and coconut trees. At least that's your best guess based on the hand gestures and laughter. Their living room is barely larger than your kitchen back home, but it holds everything they need. A hammock, 2 chairs, 1 functional, a table with 3 legs and a rock for balance, and shelves stacked with bowls, rice containers, and a statue of a laughing Buddha tied down with string. The windows, really just rectangular holes with shutters, let in the breeze. From one, you see a child jumping from one raft to another like a tiny superhero. From another, an old man scolds a goose that is absolutely not listening. The background music of village life never stops. Water lapping, children laughing, a distant thump from someone hammering something that may or may not be structurally sound. You sit on a plastic stool that has clearly survived several lifetimes. The man offers you tea in a mug that says "Best Grandpa" in faded letters, which feels oddly specific, considering he doesn't look a day over 40. You sip carefully. It tastes like herbs and tin roof and patience. He tells you about their home, how he built it with his brothers, 1 plank at a time, how the roof is made from corrugated metal sheets that were once part of a fishing warehouse, how the floor used to be part of a sunken boat. She still creaks when she remembers, he jokes, patting the wood beneath your feet. The kitchen is just a corner with a stove made from a cut-open oil drum. It runs on wood, or sometimes on coconut husks if it's been a good season. The pantry? A few hanging baskets and a shelf lined with reused jars labeled in handwriting, too chaotic to decode. You spot one that just says, in thick marker. Best not to ask. Despite the simplicity, everything has a place. Even the fan, powered by a solar battery that only works when it feels like it, is tied to a bamboo beam with fishing line, and sways like a sleepy bird trying its best. The lighting comes from a single bulb, also solar, which blinks occasionally, as if winking at your confusion. Dinner is being prepared. You hear the sizzle of garlic, the chop of vegetables on a wooden board, the unmistakable clink of metal spoons on enamel bowls. The smells float through the room like an invitation. You're told to stay. Refusing would be an insult, and honestly, you weren't going anywhere anyway. The family eats sitting cross-legged on the floor. Plates are shared. Rice is refilled without asking. The youngest child, maybe 5, maybe 7, hands you a piece of fried tofu with all the seriousness of someone offering sacred treasure. You accept it with a solemn nod. It's delicious. You realize that conversation here flows differently. It drifts, pauses, picks up again. People don't interrupt. They wait. They laugh quietly and often. They tell stories with their hands, their eyebrows, their whole posture. One sentence can carry an entire afternoon inside it. Later, someone brings out a battered old radio. It crackles with static and music from a station you can't identify. A woman sings about longing or perhaps lemons. Your Vietnamese isn't great. Either way, it's beautiful. You sit back, full of rice and ginger tea, and let the song carry you like a current. One wall of the house is covered in family photos. Some are black and white, others faded by sun and salt. There's one of a wedding on a boat, the bride holding a bouquet of mangrove branches. Another shows a baby in a basket, tied to the ceiling like a homemade cradle. There's even one of a very angry-looking chicken, wearing a party hat. You don't ask. Some historians say homes like these represent the final evolution of Vietnam's riverine traditions, a blend of ancestral water culture and post-war resourcefulness. Others think they're just beautiful accidents of resilience. As usual, the historians are still debating, probably while sitting somewhere very dry. As the sun dips lower, the living room glows. The golden light dances on the water outside, reflecting up through the floorboards, as if the bay itself is whispering. Good night. Someone lights an oil lamp. Its flame flickers like a heartbeat. Soft, steady, alive. You sit there, cross-legged and slightly unbalanced on the shifting floor, listening to the creaks and sighs of the house around you. It feels like you're inside something breathing, not a structure, but a companion. A place with memory. Outside, a fish jumps, a baby cries, a mother hums, and the house, ever so gently, rocks you into stillness. You wake up just before sunrise, wrapped in the soft hush of a world not quite awake. The sky is a pale blue smear above the bay, and the water glows faintly, like it's holding its breath. Something clangs in the distance, not a sharp alarm, just a gentle chime. You sit up on your creaky guest mat, rub your eyes, and realize today's not an ordinary day. You're going to church, or rather, to the floating version of one. It takes a bit of paddling and a lot of ducking under low-hanging clotheslines and fishing nets. You pass rafts strung with lanterns, half-built fish cages, and one boat covered entirely in drying squid. Like a seafood blanket. Eventually you see it, the floating church. It's not what you expect. There's no towering steeple, no stained glass, no solemn statues. It looks like a modest house with a tin cross on the roof and a front porch wide enough to hold half the village if everyone breathes shallowly. The walls are painted light blue, but the paint is peeling, as if the sea keeps trying to claim it back. Inside, benches are arranged in two uneven rows. There's a small altar draped in white cloth, decorated with fake flowers, a candle that may or may not still be a candle, and a plastic Jesus that looks like he's weathered one too many monsoons. And standing at the front is the priest. He's wearing sandals, a life vest, and a smile that could calm a tsunami. His robe is patched in places, and his Bible is encased in a waterproof cover, probably originally meant for storing fish bait. He waves you in. "Sit where you like," he says. "God doesn't care if it wobbles." The congregation trickles in slowly, mostly families. Many barefoot, some still dripping from the short paddle over. One woman carries a parrot on her shoulder. A teenager arrives with a puppy in a basket. No one seems to find this unusual. When the service begins, it's both familiar and surreal. Hymns are sung in unison, accompanied by a worn-out ukulele and the occasional thump of waves against the floorboards. A baby cries halfway through a prayer. Someone drops a paddle. The priest pauses only once and to pull a floating sandal out of the aisle with a bamboo pole. Despite all that, or maybe because of it, there's a serenity here you can't quite describe. The water laps rhythmically under your feet. The prayers are spoken slowly as if being offered to the bay itself. You realize that in this place faith floats, quite literally. The priest tells a story. Not a sermon exactly, more like a parable he's making up as he goes. It involves a fisherman who kept losing his oars and ended up inventing a new kind of paddle using a frying pan. There's laughter, nods, and someone in the back murmurs, "That happened to Tam, didn't it?" A small chorus of agreement follows. It's unclear whether this is theology or just village gossip dressed in liturgical robes, but no one minds. Here, sacred and silly are neighbors. Then comes the baptism. A young boy, maybe 9, stands beside the priest. He's wearing his best shirt, which appears to be a school uniform with a slightly deflated SpongeBob pin. The priest guides him to a platform on the side of the church and gently lowers him into the water. There's no marble font, just the sea. And when the boy comes up dripping and blinking, the congregation cheers. A passing fisherman toots his boat's horn in celebration. The puppy barks twice. Back inside, people start passing around small plastic cups filled with sweet. Rice porridge. Communion, in this case, is sticky, warm, and comes with optional coconut shavings. You're handed one, and as you take your first bite, the priest says, "We believe in sharing joy," and also snacks. You find yourself smiling at the simplicity, the humanity of it all. No gold chalices, No Latin chants, just people afloat together, trying to be kind, trying to belong, anchored by stories, rituals, and a shared understanding that water doesn't just separate, it also holds things up. As the service ends, someone starts playing. The ukulele again. This time it's a folk song, something about mango trees and missing your grandma's soup. The priest takes off his life vest and folds it with care. "Just in case," he says with a wink. "You stay behind a little longer, helping to sweep the deck and tie down the chairs before the wind picks up." The priest thanks you and offers a blessing that sounds suspiciously like a fishing proverb. "Matey, your nets be full and your leaks be small," he says. Honestly, it works. As you paddle away, you glance back at the floating church. It sways gently, a little crooked, its blue walls faded and its roof patched, but unmistakably standing. Not despite the water, but because of it. Some scholars argue floating churches were a modern adaptation, introduced by mission groups looking to reach isolated communities. Others claim local religious leaders created them independently, born out of necessity and creativity. Either way, the truth remains. Faith found a way to float. You pass by. Another boat on your way home. This one painted bright yellow with loud music and a rooster tied to the bow. It's heading toward the church. Late to the service? Maybe. Just curious. Possibly. Here, it doesn't really matter. No one's counting. And as your oar dips once more into the shimmering water, you realize this. Belief, like everything in this village, doesn't need stone walls to stand. It only needs enough rope, enough laughter, and maybe a very determined plastic Jesus. You're starting to realize that in this village, everyone is good at something. Not good in the has a side hustle and a LinkedIn sense, but in the ancient, humble, slightly chaotic way that comes from doing something so many times that it becomes muscle memory passed down through generations. And today, you're going to meet the people who build the village itself, one floating plank at a time. They call them domok bien, sea carpenters. You paddle over to a wide, low-sitting platform that looks more like a messy garage than a workshop. Piles of bamboo poles, weathered planks, and metal drums are stacked like a shipwrecked version of a Home Depot. The smell of sawdust, salt water, and sun-warmed rope hits you like a gentle punch to the nose. 2 men and a woman are already at work. One of them barefoot, another with a cigarette that somehow stays lit despite the breeze. None of them are measuring anything. They just saw, hammer, tie, test the balance by standing on it, and occasionally argue with each other in the friendly way that suggests no one's keeping score. You ask if they've been trained. The woman laughs so hard she drops a hammer in the water. "Trained?" she says. "We were born on rafts." She pulls up a new one. It's not even rusted. That's experience for you. These builders don't use blueprints, they use stories. A good roof, someone tells you, should be like a conical hat, wide, light, and not afraid of the wind. Walls should whisper with the E. Water, too stiff and they'll crack. Too loose, and you'll wake up in your neighbor's pantry. They show you how to tie the crossbeams together with rattan fiber soaked in brine. Apparently, it's stronger than nails in humid weather, and if it breaks, the fish can eat it. Eco-friendly, the carpenter grins. "We were green before green was cool. You try to help. Big mistake. Your knot slips, your plank wobbles, and your entire section of raft threatens to fold in on itself like a soggy pancake." The builders are kind, but visibly amused. One of them hands you a cold tea and says, "Maybe just watch today." As you sit back, sipping your drink and nursing your ego, they start working on a new house base. The process is mesmerizing. Bamboo laid down in tight rows, cross-lashed and weighted with stones until it settles just right in the water. Then comes the frame, a puzzle of angles that somehow holds its shape without a single power tool. Every so often someone takes a step back, squints and says, "It needs more curve." You're not sure what they mean, but then they add a diagonal beam and suddenly it looks right. There's a sort of elegance to the imbalance. A young boy watches from a nearby raft, chewing on sugarcane and pretending not to be impressed. One of the builders tosses him a nail pouch. He catches it one-handed. "That's my nephew," the woman says proudly. "Built his first cage for ducks when he was 6. The ducks escaped, but the cage was solid." You learn that most homes here are rebuilt every 5 to 10 years. Not because they collapse, but because they evolve. Families grow, storms shift the currents. Someone gets tired of facing east, and every time the sea carpenters come, with their tools, their laughter, and their uncanny sense of balance. The floating structures aren't just homes, they're statements. One man built a 3-story fish cage system under his raft, and now claims to be CEO of Fish. Another created a rotating house, literally tied to a central pole so it can turn with the sun. Lazy people think it's magic, he says. Smart people know it's math. I just wanted shade at noon. Even the decorative touches matter. One house has its roof shaped like a crab. Another uses old soda bottles to line the windows, catching sunlight and turning it into a poor man's stained glass. You ask about a particularly elaborate wind chime. It's made from spoons, storm spoons, they tell you. They only clang when it's going to rain, or when someone's cooking badly. There are no straight lines here, no building codes, no HOA meetings, no overpriced permits. Just trust, trial and error, and an endless willingness to float through failure. You start to think, maybe architecture doesn't need to be rigid to be strong. Maybe it just needs to float. A brief pause in the work happens around noon. Everyone sits on the raft, sharing boiled eggs, rice balls, and a soup that smells aggressively healthy. You're offered a bowl, and you don't dare decline. It tastes like seaweed, garlic, and distant thunder. During lunch, one carpenter pulls out an old photo, grainy and water-stained, of her grandmother standing beside a houseboat twice her size, holding a saw in one hand and a baby in the other. Monsieur built the village's first 2-story house, she says, beaming. Then she tore it down because she said it blocked her neighbor's view. Some historians believe the techniques used here originated from ancient Champa boat builders, passed down orally and adjusted with each generation. Others argue the style is purely improvisational, a kind of aquatic jazz architecture. Either way, the result is the same: buildings that don't fight the sea, but live with it. By late afternoon, the house's base is nearly done. It floats perfectly. Balanced like a lily pad, you're invited to stand on it. It rocks gently like a promise. The builders nod, satisfied. She floats, one says, patting the edge. She'll live a long time. As you leave, the sky is glowing that deep, almost syrupy orange. The tools are packed away. The tea is gone. And someone is already humming the next day's tune. The new raft bobs gently behind your boat, like a sleepy dog waiting for its first night. And as you drift homeward, you realize you've just watched something rare, a house being born. Not from concrete or contracts, but from memory, intuition, and the endless patience of people who've spent their whole lives dancing on water. The sun is high and the village settles into that slow in-between time. Too late for morning hustle, too early for evening lull. You drift past homes that seem to nap in the heat, curtains fluttering like lazy flags, dogs sprawled on bamboo decks, and grandmothers fanning themselves with plastic lids. And then, almost without noticing, you arrive at a place with no smell of cooking, no sound of chatter, and no chickens waddling dangerously close to the edge. It's a floating platform, same size as the others, but quieter, more utilitarian. And next to it floats a strange contraption made of barrels, netting, and what might once have been parts of a refrigerator. Welcome to the waste management system of a floating village. That's a polite way of saying the trash situation. You're met by a woman in her 50s wearing thick gloves, a conical hat, and a smile that suggests she's either deeply philosophical or has seen things you can't begin to understand. Her name is D2, and she's the unofficial garbage boss around here. Most places hide their trash, she says, handing you a bamboo pole with a net on the end. We feed ours to the fish or the fire, or sometimes it disappears. You follow her onto a narrow dock lined with buckets, bags, and bins, none of which match. There's no official recycling program, no plastic-free slogans, but everything has a place. First stop, the floating compost basket, a netted pen dangling. Off the side of the house, half submerged in water. Food scraps go in here. Peelings, rice leftovers, bits of dried anchovy no one wants to admit they overcooked. Beneath, fish swarm in gratitude. The best-fed tilapia in the bay, D2. says with pride. They finish what we start. Next comes the dry trash bin. Plastic bottles, tin cans, bits of styrofoam. These are stored in large sacks and handed off weekly to a boat that comes from the mainland. It's not a municipal service. It's a guy named Fook who turned his fishing boat into a floating trash taxi. He used to fish for squid, she explains. Now he fishes for recyclables. You ask about the smell, she nods. You get used to it. Or you move farther upwind. And with that, she pokes at a pile of drying seaweed laid out beside the compost bin. This helps too, she adds. Smells like the ocean punched a lemon. The fire pile is next. Paper, dried leaves, broken baskets, anything that'll burn. They light it on windless mornings, letting the smoke rise gently over the bay. Children are forbidden near. The flame. But they love watching it, like a campfire that smells faintly of homework and regret. And then there's the mystery pile. The bits no one knows what to do with. A broken sandal, a cracked mirror, a baby doll arm. These are stored in a crate labeled choduya, waiting for fate. Sometimes artists come and take pieces to turn into sculptures. Sometimes someone finds a use. Most of the time it just sits there, becoming a kind of floating museum of things that used to matter. You ask if anyone ever throws trash into the bay. D2 looks horrified. Only if you want to be haunted, she says, by the fish and by your neighbors, maybe both. Then she laughs and adds, also your floating house starts to smell like a crab funeral. Interestingly, the village has an unspoken rule. If something floats past your home and it's not yours, you still pick it up. It's like reverse littering. Instead of pretending trash isn't your problem, you adopt it. Some say this. Tradition started after a massive storm in the 90s, when so much debris floated through the village that it became hard to tell whose junk was whose. Instead of arguing, they just started helping each other clean. There's even a weekly Clean the Bay morning, where everyone goes out in boats and scoops up whatever doesn't belong. Kids compete to find the weirdest object. Last month, a child proudly brought back a microwave. No one knows where it came from, it doesn't matter. It got painted pink and now holds seashells in someone's kitchen. D2 pulls out a laminated sign from under a tarp. It's handmade, decorated with smiling fish, and says, "Don't. Feed the ghost. Clean your house." She hangs it up with care. Some scholars speculate that these waste practices are echoes of ancient water-dwelling cultures, where disposing of garbage poorly could poison not just the environment, but the livelihood. Others suggest it's just common sense. Either way, the result is the same. A delicate balance quietly maintained by people who can't afford to ignore their surroundings. Before you leave, D2 offers you a homemade broom, a bundle of twigs tied to a bamboo stick. Sweep. Your boat before sunset, she says. It's bad luck to sleep with leaves underfoot. You thank her and paddle away, the broom tucked at your side, the scent of drying fish peel following you like a weird cologne. And as you float back through the village, you start to notice things differently. A bottle cap wedged between two planks. A plastic bag caught on a fishing line. A rusted spoon drifting like a jellyfish. Small things, but not invisible. You reach your raft, untie your boat, and before you head inside, you do something small. You reach down, pluck the spoon from the water, and place it in your newly designated mystery pile. Congratulations, you're part of the system now. Evening has slipped in without announcement. The sky is painted in shades of lavender and apricot, the water glassy and reflective, like the whole world is holding its breath. But you're not focused on the sunset. You're focused on the sound of drums and laughter and shouting. Not angry shouting, the good kind, the kind that smells faintly of rice wine and celebration. You follow the noise across the water, weaving between rafts lit by paper lanterns and strings of dim solar. And then you see it, a cluster of boats tied together to form a floating pavilion. People are gathered in bright clothes. There are flowers, food, singing, a suspicious number of pineapples. You've arrived at a floating wedding. Someone hands you a bowl of sweet soup and gestures for you to sit. So you do. Right next to a grandmother peeling boiled eggs with terrifying precision, and a toddler chewing on what looks like a ceremonial fan. No one seems concerned, least of all the bride. She arrives standing on a paddleboard of all things, dressed in a flowing audai that flutters dramatically in the breeze. Behind her is a rowboat carrying the groom, who looks simultaneously elated and terrified, not of marriage but of capsizing. A small dog sits between them like a witness. They paddle to the center of the raft, where an arch made of mangrove branches and pink cloth has been tied down with fishing weights. The crowd cheers. Someone bangs a cooking pot like a gong. Another tosses flower petals made from recycled rice bags. It's chaotic, beautiful, very, very floating. The officiant, who may or may not also be the village fishmonger, begins the ceremony. He reads from a sheet of paper held down by seashells and occasionally pauses to swat at mosquitoes. The couple exchange rings made from carved coconut shell. A baby cries. A fish jumps. No one notices. The vows are simple. No grand promises, no dramatic declarations. Just two people saying they'll paddle the same way, even when the current shifts. There's a line about never using the last of the chili paste without asking. It gets applause. Then comes the feast. Boats pull up from every direction, delivering trays of food, sticky rice in banana leaves, fried fish cakes shaped like hearts, and something jelly-like that you're told is dessert but also medicine. You eat it anyway. It tastes like mint and mystery. The bride's grandmother sings a song about love and fishing nets. The groom's cousin plays a plastic recorder with more enthusiasm than talent. Someone starts dancing. The floor wobbles. A bowl tips over. Laughter explodes. You're offered a shot of rice wine poured into a reused yogurt cup. You toast with a woman who might be the aunt of the bride or just really good at crashing parties. Either way, she clinks, cups with you and says, "To floating love." It's easy to get swept up in it all. The simplicity, the absurdity, the warmth. No stage, no chandeliers, just ropes, wood, and people who refuse to let water stop them from celebrating. You learn that weddings like this are a tradition. Not always this big, not always this organized, but always floating. Some couples even marry mid-journey, boats tied together just long enough to exchange vows before drifting apart to join the reception raft. Others host ceremonies at low tide, so they can rise together as the water returns. It's poetic and mildly soggy. One man tells you about a storm wedding, when the couple insisted on marrying despite a typhoon warning. They tied everything down, wore raincoats over there. Haodai said their vows between thunderclaps. The wind was loud, he says, but they shouted louder. Historians, yes them again, believe these floating wedding customs emerged not just from necessity, but as a celebration of the environment itself. On the water, you can't control everything. So instead, you embrace it. Let the tide be. Your music. Let the fish be your audience. Let the weather write your vows in the wind. You wander from raft to raft, each one offering a different kind of joy. Card games, storytelling, hammocks strung between poles. One group is playing a version of karaoke, where the loser has to dance with the village's grumpiest duck. The duck looks deeply unamused. A small girl with a flower crown pulls you into a circle dance. You try to keep up. You fail gloriously. Everyone claps anyway. At one point, the bride and groom take a small boat out into the bay, alone. Just for a moment. No one speaks. Everyone watches. It's tradition, a symbolic journey. They drift for a few minutes, just far enough that the music fades. Then they return, and the party resumes like nothing ever paused. As the night deepens, someone lights a ring of floating candles and sets them drifting around the raft. The water glows softly, flickering with each gentle wave. The village seems to sigh in contentment. You find yourself sitting on the edge of the dance raft, feet dangling into the water, head full of laughter and sea breeze. Someone hands you a leftover coconut pastry. You eat it without asking what's in it. It tastes like cinnamon and storytelling, and as you look out at the bobbing lanterns, the couple slow dancing on an unstable deck, the kids chasing each other with strings of beads, and the goose still, judging everyone. You feel it again, that strange, beautiful thing. The knowledge that floating doesn't mean rootless. Here, celebration isn't about grandeur. It's about presence, about saying yes to love, to water, to whatever happens. Next, the morning after a wedding is always quieter, not out of solemnity but exhaustion. The bay has gone from festival to whisper. Rafts gently sway, confetti clings stubbornly to bamboo poles, and someone's half-deflated balloon floats slowly toward the horizon, like a weary partygoer trying to hitch a ride home. But the silence doesn't last long. A low thrum begins in the distance, soft at first, like the humming of an enormous insect, then louder, then unmistakable. You follow the sound and see it. A cluster of boats moving fast and together, ropes coiled, barrels tied down, anchors swinging like pendulums. A storm is coming. And the village is about to move. You didn't mishear. The village is going to move. It starts with people untying ropes. Not panic, just choreography. Rafts are released from their familiar moorings. Boats are nudged into position. Platforms that once formed tidy rows begin drifting, gently spinning like carousel horses in slow water. There's no shouting, no urgent alarm, just action. An old man passes by in a motorboat with a megaphone duct-taped to a broom handle. "Storm by nightfall," he announces, voice crackling. "Pack the nets, tie your ducks, move inland." You paddle quickly to join the effort. A woman hands you a coil of rope and a thermos of something that tastes like hot soy sauce and courage. "You'll need both," she says. The floating village is preparing for its version of evacuation, but unlike land towns, they don't leave. Their homes, they take them. The houses, after all, are built to float, to sway, to survive. But when the waves get mean and the wind grows teeth, it's better to be tucked into a safer corner of the bay, deeper, more shielded, less exposed. You help a family secure their floating chicken coop. The chickens are unimpressed. One of them pecks your ankle with deep suspicion. You apologize and promise to be less threatening. People are wrapping tarps over roofs, reinforcing nets, moving heavy objects from the corners of rafts to their centers. Small child is tasked with relocating his pet frog to a waterproof bucket. He does this with the solemnity of a sea captain relocating a sacred relic. Then comes the big task, moving the homes. Each house is tied to a motorboat or paddled by a team, like a regatta of tiny floating dream houses on a field trip. You've never seen anything like it. Roofs swaying, satellite dishes tilting, one house with laundry still fluttering on the line as if to say, "We're not scared." You help guide a raft alongside a group heading for a cove you didn't even know existed. A quiet inlet, hidden behind rocky cliffs and mangroves thick as myths. It's where the village hides when the sky gets angry. Once there, people start anchoring down, not with bricks or concrete, with ropes tied to mangrove roots, to rocks, even to each other. It's a web of survival. The village tucks itself into a ball, like a sea creature curling inward. You look around and see a grandmother calmly slicing papaya while straddling two platforms lashed together. A boy is tying empty water jugs to the roof. "In case we need extra float," he says, as if that's a normal thing to plan for. It's both chaotic and precise. A house tilts too far. 6 people run over and shift the balance. A pet parrot escapes. It's lured back with fish crackers. Someone drops a hammer. It's retrieved by a child with a very long stick and zero fear of falling in. Some villagers even dismantle parts of their homes, just the edges, to make the rafts smaller and easier to move, like turtles shedding shell pieces for speed. The whole event is so strange, so beautiful, you almost forget it's because of danger. But then you see the clouds. Thick, dark, crawling over the sea like a warning. The air feels tighter. The light goes flat, like the world's been dimmed by a cautious hand. Some historians believe this ability, the art of village migration, dates back to seafaring cultures of Southeast Asia who treated land as optional. Others say it was born from necessity after years of losing homes to storms. Either way, the skill is passed down like folklore. As the final house is tied into place, the wind picks up. Tarps flap like wings. Lanterns are pulled in. Children are called inside, even the rebellious ones. One by one, the villagers retreat into their floating sanctuaries. You're offered shelter by the same family who fed you sweet soup at the wedding. They say there's space if you don't mind sleeping. Next to a barrel of fermented shrimp paste, You agree before they finish the sentence. Night falls fast. The storm begins not with a bang, but a moan, the wind slipping through mangroves like it's searching for something it lost. Rain taps the eye, roof like a gentle warning. Waves lap harder. You sit inside, curled on a mat, wrapped in a blanket that smells like sea and time. The house rocks, not dangerously, just persistently, like it's whispering, "We've done this before." Outside, ropes strain, tarps ripple. Water splashes into buckets with familiar rhythm. It's not fear you feel, it's awe. This isn't survival by brute force. It's survival by knowing the water, respecting it, dancing with it. You fall asleep to the storm's lullaby. Wind, rain, wood, and the quiet breathing of a house that knows how to float. Morning arrives like an apology. The storm has passed. The sky, now innocent and blue, pretends nothing happened. But the village remembers. The water is calmer, yes, but it still carries the taste of churn and memory. Bits of leaves float past. A sandal drifts by unclaimed. Somewhere a rooster crows, late but enthusiastic, and slowly people begin to untie their homes. You watch as the village unfolds itself again. It's like a flower reopening after a hard rain. Ropes are loosened, platforms nudged back into position, and once again the floating community stretches across the bay, loose and lazy, like a cat after a nap. It's tempting to think there are no rules here, that this kind of place floats on freedom alone. But that would be a mistake. The truth is, the floating village is held together by more than just rope and bamboo. It's held together by rules. Not the kind printed on paper or posted on walls, but the kind whispered between neighbors and enforced with eyebrow raises and passive-aggressive fish deliveries. You're invited to sit with a group of elders gathered on a shaded raft. They sip tea, chew betel leaf, and watch the reconstruction with the calm authority of people who've already seen everything twice. One of them, Bak Dung, tells you about the most important rule. Never build your house bigger than the truong. Lessings, the village leader's home is modest. 2 rooms, a deck, and a hammock so old it practically has tenure. Any attempt to show off, to build something grander, is seen as bad manners. And in this village, bad manners are worse than bad weather. There are other rules too, like the quiet after 9 agreement, not for sleep, but to keep the water calm. Sound travels far over the bay. Loud music after dark can ripple across. Homes wake the fish and make babies cry 3 rafts over. The punishment: someone shows up with a paddle and sits in front of your house until you apologize. No words, just paddle. It's surprisingly effective. Then there's the rule of first net, first fish. Fishing zones aren't marked, but everyone knows who casts where. Drop your net in someone else's spot, and you'll find your paddle tied to the top of a bamboo pole, a floating village version of public shaming. You ask if there's ever been a real fight. The elders chuckle. Once, Bakdung says, 2 brothers argued over a floating watermelon patch. One tied his house to the others just to annoy him. They spun in circles for an hour before getting dizzy and calling it off. Disputes. Here are rare and often settled with food. If someone's angry at you, bring them dried fish and a joke. If they're really angry, bring shrimp paste and a promise to fix their roof. Legal action? Please. The water doesn't respect paperwork. You notice how each house faces a different direction, but none blocks another's view. It's called Biet Jong Jio, someone explains, knowing the wind's path. You don't just build for yourself. You build with awareness of others. Privacy is a flexible concept. Sound, smell, even arguments, they all travel. So you learn to be gentle. Even the kids follow rules. There's a rotating duck patrol to make sure the birds don't invade the compost baskets. There's a ban on jumping between rafts, unless you've passed the no-splash test, and if you lose your oar, you have to retrieve it yourself. No adult help unless it floats toward the mangroves, which are considered neutral territory. These rules may seem arbitrary, but they keep everything balanced. Literally, one house out of place can shift the current. One family's negligence can flood another's fish pen. The village functions like a web, invisible, interconnected, and constantly adjusting. And yet, there's room for mischief. You hear about the annual secret tea war, a tradition where during the full moon, people sneak over to swap sugar with salt in their neighbors' tea jars. It's harmless, funny, and an unspoken test of who can laugh at themselves. Last year, someone salted the wedding couple's tea. They laughed so hard they cried. The village declared their marriage officially blessed. There's also the legend of the Phantom Fisherman, a prankster who paddles silently at night, untying boats just enough so they drift a few meters by morning. The only clue is a fish drawn in chalk on the deck. No one's ever caught him. Some think it's backdung. He denies it too quickly. Even within structure, there's play. That's the charm here. The rules don't stifle. They breathe, they bend, they make room for both order and joy. Some historians say these kinds of unwritten codes exist in all small communities. The invisible social contracts that keep people civil without courts or cops. But in floating villages, where homes touch, waves echo and space is both shared and fragile, the rules are essential. They're how you avoid chaos when the nearest road is a paddle away. As you listen, you notice someone gently retightening the ropes between two homes. Not because they're tangled, just because it's what you do. You care for the ties, you maintain the distance. You know when to float close and when to drift back. Before you leave, a young boy hands you a sheet of paper. It's not a drawing. It's a handwritten list. My family's rules for floating life. Don't fish near Uncle High's boat. His fish get nervous. Always share the rainwater. If the wind howls at night, tell a story until it stops. Don't sleep mad. The water remembers. You tuck it into your bag, because you suspect you'll want to remember them too. It's a slow golden morning, the kind where the sun rises like it's politely knocking. The breeze carries just a whisper of yesterday's storm, and the water reflects everything as if it's trying to be helpful. Today, you're going to meet someone important. Well, not important in the formal sense. There's no title, no salary, no office. Just a worn wooden boat, a small bag of tools, and a thermos of tea that smells like it's at least half ginger. This is Bak Hoa, and he's the village doctor. Sort of. Bak Hoa doesn't have a degree. What he does have is a lifetime of tending to fevers, cuts, fishhook accidents, and mysterious swamp rashes that look like something out of an overactive folktale. He's part healer, part myth, part traveling therapist with very calloused feet. You meet him as he's tying his boat to a small raft where a young girl sits frowning at her elbow. It's been stung by something, possibly a jellyfish, possibly her younger brother. The diagnosis is inconclusive. Bak Hoa examines it with great seriousness, nods once and pulls out a glass jar full of a greenish paste. Made from guava leaves and stubbornness, he tells her. She doesn't laugh, but her mother does. The paste is applied. A bandage of banana leaf follows. The girl is bribed with a sweet potato. Treatment successful. You climb into the boat as he moves on to the next patient. His equipment includes 2 stethoscopes, only one works, a dozen jars of homemade ointments, a stack of hand-stitched notebooks, and a flashlight held together with tape and prayer. He carries everything in a fishing basket. His prescription pad is the back of lottery tickets. The next stop is a woman with a headache. He checks her pulse, listens to her back, asks 3 questions about her dreams, then declares the cure to be more water, fewer arguments with her, cousin and 1 hot towel applied to the back of the neck while listening to sea snails. It's somewhere between medicine and magic. You ask how he learned all this. He shrugs. My grandmother was a healer. My father fished but also knew herbs. I listened. I guessed. I tried. Then people kept calling me back. He says his real education came from mistakes. Once I treated a stomachache with crab soup. Never again. Another time he cured a fever with rice wine and ginger, but only because the patient fell asleep and forgot they were sick. His boat doesn't just carry medicine. It carries presence, comfort, a reminder that someone will come when you call, even if your emergency is I sneezed and it felt weird. And make no mistake, in a floating village, being sick is a serious challenge. Hospitals are hours away by motorboat. Pharmacies are inconsistent. Power cuts happen. Some homes don't even have fridges, let alone clean bandages, so people rely on each other, on experience, on home remedies passed down like heirlooms. You ask about emergencies. He nods, serious. Now there was a breech birth during a typhoon. A heart attack while the nearest clinic was flooded. We do what we can, he says. Sometimes we save, sometimes we wait, and sometimes we hold hands until it's over. He doesn't elaborate. You don't press. At noon you stop at a floating house where a boy has a cough. Bak Hoa listens carefully, gives him a steam inhalation using boiled water and crushed eucalyptus leaves, then teaches him a breathing game involving a straw and a cup of water. It ends with giggles and a burp. You float for hours, house to house, raft to raft, dispensing tiny comforts. One woman gets a salve for her cracked heels, a fisherman receives a bandage for a hook wound, and a lecture about watching where he casts. A grandmother is told to sleep on her other side and stop worrying about everyone else's laundry. In between visits, Bak Hoa tells you stories. About a time he stitched a wound using fishing line. About a man who claimed garlic could fix everything until it ruined his love life. About a woman who faked illness just to get a free foot massage. I gave it to her anyway, he says. Sometimes, that's the real medicine. Some historians suggest that traveling healers like him were once common across river communities in Southeast Asia, improvising care in areas where infrastructure never arrived. Others argue they emerged only after colonial medical systems collapsed, leaving gaps that needed to be filled. Whatever the case, no one debates their impact. You stop at a quiet raft where a baby has a fever. The mother looks exhausted. The baby's cry is sharp and rhythmic, like a metronome of worry. Bak Hoa leans in gently, checks temperature, makes a tea from star anise and lemongrass, sings a lullaby you don't recognize. The baby quiets. The mother tears up. He hands her a folded note, a list of herbs, a prayer, and instructions on where to paddle if things get worse. He doesn't charge. People give me fish, or tea, or stories. He grins. And sometimes gossip is better than currency. As the sun lowers, painting the bay in honey, you ask how long he plans to keep doing this. He shrugs again. Until I float away, I guess. He taps the side of his boat. She knows the way. You step off at your own raft, suddenly aware of how fragile and miraculous this all is. A doctor without a clinic, a village without a hospital. Yet somehow, no one is truly alone. And as his boat disappears into the soft orange haze, you can still hear him humming, a quiet tune. Carried by the breeze echoing over the water like reassurance. Whatever happens here, someone will come. There's something in the air today, not the scent of fish sauce or wood smoke, but change. You feel it even before you step into your boat. The village is quieter than usual, not silent, just subdued, the kind of hush that wraps around farewells. You paddle toward the edge of the bay, past familiar homes, the one with the pink tarp roof, the one where the goose lives like royalty, the one with laundry always drying no matter the hour. Except now some of them are gone, not vanished exactly, just moved. A floating house leaves no footprint. When a family decides to leave, to move to land, to the city, to a different kind of life, there's no for sale sign, no moving van. One day they're here. The next their raft is bare, the water smooth, and all that remains is an outline in your memory. You reach a floating platform that used to belong to a couple who ran a tiny snack shop from their deck. Now it's just planks and an old pair of vows. Flip-flops, one upside down. A neighbor quietly collects them and ties the platform to her own raft. "I'll use the wood," she says. No need to waste a good floor. You see signs of absence everywhere. Empty moorings, half-tied ropes fluttering. A plastic chair bobbing by itself like it's waiting for someone to come back and finish their tea. A teenager nearby tells you her cousin left last week. "To go to school in town," she says, then shrugs. Maybe she'll come back, maybe. Not. Her voice is steady, but her eyes drift to the place where her cousin's house used to float. It's not a mass exodus, just a gentle, persistent tide. One or two families at a time. The government has offered relocation incentives. New houses on land, access to schools, clean water, electricity that doesn't blink like a nervous candle. For many, it's tempting. For others, it's necessary. Some villagers go willingly, others are more reluctant. You visit an elder named Ba Mai, who sits at the edge of her raft, peeling cassava and watching the bay like it's a story she once wrote. Her home is small, but vibrant. Curtains made of fishing nets, potted plants growing in old boots, a radio that only works when it rains. She tells you her children have all moved to the mainland. They say it's better, she says. No floods, no fish smells, no boats to fix, just walls. She chuckles. They miss the leaks when it's hot. You ask if she plans to follow them. She shakes her head. This raft knows me. The wind knows me. The fish know me. On land. I would be lost, but she admits it's lonely sometimes. Her neighbour's house, once tethered nearby, is gone. She still sets 2 cups out for tea. Old habits, old ghosts. You help her repaint part of her roof. Bright yellow by her request. If I'm going to float alone, she says, I might as well shine. Later, she insists you stay for lunch. Sour soup, fried anchovies and rice cooked on a tiny stove that's seen better days, but still hums with warmth. As you eat, she pulls out a photo album, plastic sleeves stuffed with pictures of birthdays, weddings, children standing proudly beside fish larger than themselves. One photo shows a young girl asleep in a hammock, waves lapping gently beneath her. That's me, she says. Before I knew how to swim, but I always trusted the water. The truth is, life here is changing, slowly, tenderly, but certainly. The younger generation dreams of Wi-Fi that works, of jobs that don't require nets and calloused hands, of houses that stay still when the tide shifts. Some of the remaining villagers try to adapt. You see one family installing a solar panel array, with instructions printed in 3 languages, and none of them Vietnamese. A man is testing a water filtration system using coconut husks and PVC pipe. The village is floating toward the future, whether it likes it or not. You ask someone, half-jokingly, if the village will disappear one day. The answer surprises you. No, she says. It will just move like always. Maybe not here, maybe not now, but the spirit, the way we float, live, forgive the sea, that won't sink. Some historians argue that these floating villages are unsustainable, that climate change, overfishing, and modernization will eventually force everyone ashore. Others believe they'll adapt, as they always have, building smarter rafts. Blending old wisdom with new tech, you're starting to suspect it might be both. As evening approaches, you paddle back through the village. You pass a platform where children once played, now bare except for a single paper lantern left behind, gently swaying in the breeze. You pass a house with a for-lease sign written in chalk, a rare, ironic attempt at formality in a place that rarely uses paper. And then you pass a home where 3 generations eat dinner together, laughter spilling into the bay, their house anchored by ropes, memories, and stubborn affection. You dock at your own raft, sit down and listen. The water still laps, the fish still splash. A flute plays somewhere, a baby cries, the village floats. A little thinner, a little quieter, but still here. For now, and for now, is enough. You wake to the soft thump of a paddle against wood, and the low murmur of morning voices drifting across the bay. The light is gentle, not the sharp glare of noon, but the mellow glow of a world slowly warming its edges. Today feels different, not because anything grand is happening, but because nothing is, and after everything that feels like a gift. You sit on the deck of your borrowed raft, legs dangling, toes brushing the water's skin. The bay is still, the kind of stillness that doesn't feel empty, but held like a breath kept just long enough to remind you you're alive. In front of you, the village moves in its own sleepy rhythm. A child yawns from behind a curtain, a woman pours hot water into a dented teapot, and hums to the tune of something older than anyone can name. A dog barks once lazily. Somewhere a plastic basin clinks. This is what remains when the weddings end, when the storms pass, when the ropes are retied. A rhythm, a return, a floating kind of peace. You decide to paddle, not to visit anyone, not to learn, just to be. You move, slowly, drifting between rafts like a polite breeze. People wave, and some with smiles, others just with their eyes. No one asks where you're going. Everyone assumes you're going nowhere, and they're right. You pass a house with seashells lining its walkway, placed carefully like offerings. Another has wind chimes made of bottle caps, tinkling gently with each gust. A third has a banner, That says welcome home, Isgrad, even though no one seems to have left. The water is particularly clear today. Beneath your boat, fish flit like thoughts. Quicksilver gone. You catch a glimpse of something shimmering. A spoon, maybe, or a memory. You let it be. You stop by a cluster of mangroves, their roots reaching down like hands trying to hold. The sea still. This is where the village sometimes hides during storms. Today it hides nothing. The leaves rustle like whispers. You rest there for a while, listening to the language of shadows. On your way back, you pass the floating school. It's empty now, but a drawing flutters from the side. A house, 2 stick figures, a boat with a big sun over it. A child's version. Though of home simple floating, smiling, you wonder what happens to a place like this in memory. Will it become a story told at dinner tables by people who now live behind brick walls? Will someone point to a picture one day and say, "That's where your grandmother used to live, right on the water"? Will it fade or float on? Some say memory is like water, always moving, sometimes still, occasionally deep, but always finding its way back. You believe that now. Back at your raft, you brew a small pot of tea. The leaves unfold slowly, as if waking from a dream. You sip. It's bitter, earthy, calming, the kind of taste that doesn't impress at first, but lingers, kindly. You write a list of things you want to remember. The way fish splash when no one's watching. The laughter that echoes better over water. The rules that weren't rules but still held everything in place. The homes that drifted but didn't vanish. The people who waved every time, even when they didn't know your name. You add one more. The feeling of floating, not away, not toward, just with. Evening arrives gently. No thunder, no ceremony. Just the slow stretch of shadows, the cool hush of air slipping between the planks. The soft hum of a village preparing to sleep. You lie down on your mat, arms behind your head, staring up at a roof patched with stories. A lantern sways above you, throwing golden ripples across the ceiling. The water just beneath murmurs its usual lullaby, and you realize this was never about architecture. Not really. It was about softness. About building something with what you have. Bamboo, rope, wind, laughter, and letting it hold you, however imperfectly, above the shifting sea. It was about learning how to float, and how to let others float with you. So you close your eyes, let the raft sway, let the bay breathe, let the night wrap around you like a borrowed blanket that smells faintly of tea, salt, and kindness. End of script. Sweet dreams.